Hello everyone, this is Dr. P. Mary Anupama. Today we'll be studying nitrogen cycle. First, let us see the importance of nitrogen. We all know that nitrogen is present in the form of the organic molecule, that is proteins. These biomolecules, they are present in the plants, animals and various other living forms. All the living forms, they either take up this nitrogen in the form of nitrates, or at times some living forms can even take it up in the form of nascent nitrogen. Finally, they convert into nitrates and then into amino acids, and then these amino acids, they are the building blocks of the proteins. So for protein, if you want to have proteins as biomolecules, which are the structural elements, nitrogen is one important element, that is constituent of proteins. At times you see that this nitrogen, it becomes the limiting factor because it has to be absorbed only by the producers, that is the green plants, which are the starting elements of our ecosystem, and these they take it up in an inorganic form, then they convert into organic form, and then they pass on to the food chain, that is it goes to the herbivores and then to the carnivores. So the inorganic form of nitrogen, it is converted into either ammonia or then into the nitrate form, while this particular thing, it's transformed into nitrates, then into the amino acids and then into proteins. So the elemental form of nitrogen, once it's converted into this organic state, it is passed on to the various living forms. You see that it is present in the humus also, nitrogen, and it is a part of nucleic acids also, apart from proteins. What are the main sources of nitrogen in the atmosphere? You see that nitrogen, it is found in all the geochemical deposits, like right from the rocks. You have the salts of ammonia, nitrates, nitrites, etc., which are gradually converted to the soil as the rocks wither up. So these salts which are present in the soil, they are in the water soluble form. So once during rain or when water is there, they are converted into soil solution. So this soil solution, it becomes available for the various living forms which are present in the soil, which can be microforms like bacteria or even macroforms. The organic matter of these living organisms, what happens is it is cycled in the food chain. Say for example, the organic form is the proteins. The proteins which are produced by the producers, these are transferred to the consumers. So as these die, that means even the plants or the animals, as they die, these proteins, they get degraded, they get decomposed, and finally you have the process of humidification which is taking place, and the nitrogen reaches the soil. So this process of humidification, what it does is it liberates all these organic compounds. It need not be just proteins, even the carbohydrates, all of them, they are converted again into simpler forms. Okay, so like fertilizers, and these decomposed forms, that is the humus, it can be added to the plants, especially the crops. Okay, because they can again convert this ammonia or the nitrates into proteins. So even the volcanic activities, they also provide some nitrogen to the atmosphere. Now let us see the two important steps that occur in this nitrogen cycle. First one is the mineralization. In this process, what you see is that the microbes, they convert the unavailable organic form of nitrogen into simpler form. That means, say for example, proteins are there. Proteins are the complex forms of the nitrogen. They are converted into simpler form of nitrogen, and this involves ammonification as well as nitrification, that leads to conversion of complex forms of nitrogen to simpler forms of nitrogen. The next one is immobilization. In this process, what happens is whatever the available form of nitrogen that is there, that is either ammonia or even the nitrate, these are utilized by the living forms, firstly the plants or even the microorganisms, and then they convert that ammonia and nitrate into the organic form, that is the protein form. So thus what happens is it is immobilized. The nitrogen is immobilized in the living forms. So here when we have to see the summary of the nitrogen cycle, it involves ammonification, nitrification and even denitrification. The steps involved in the nitrogen cycle. First let us see ammonification. The nitrogen which is available in the free form, it is converted to ammonia, which can be utilized by living organisms. So here the bound organic nitrogen which is present in the organic matter like proteins, amines, amides, urea, all these also can be converted to ammonia by the microbial population. And here you see that based upon the decomposition, the degree of decomposition by various different types of microorganisms, the decaying matter, it is decomposed, and during this process some ammonia is also released. The proteins, they are degraded by proteolytic enzymes. Okay, these enzymes, they are secreted outside, extracellular enzymes, these are secreted outside by the microorganisms, and the proteins, they are converted into polypeptides and then into amino acids, and then from them the ammonia can be released. So this is what is the first step, that is ammonification. Several microorganisms help in the process of ammonification, like some bacteria. Examples are there: Pseudomonas, Bacillus, Clostridium, Serratia, etc. And when it comes to fungi, you have Alternaria, Aspergillus, Penicillium, and Mucor. So what do you see that when the proteins are being decomposed by aerobic method, the end products are, it is not just ammonia but even carbon dioxide is released, water, sulfates, and when this particular decomposition of proteins is taking place by anaerobic process, we call that anaerobic decomposition as putrefaction. So this putrefaction, it liberates hydrogen sulfide and mercaptans. Okay, and even mercaptans. So bacteria, these are mainly found to liberate more of ammonia as compared to the fungal species. So what you see is that urea plus water, okay, it is converted into ammonia and carbon dioxide. So this is how ammonification is taking place. The microbes which are involved in the production of ammonia from urea, they are Bacillus, Proteus, Micrococcus, Sarcina, etc. You have even amines which are acted upon by some microorganisms, like we have Pseudomonas, Protoaminobacter, and these release the enzymes amino oxidases, and finally ammonia is released. You also have amides. Amides, these are converted into ammonia, and the enzymes that are involved are amidases. So here you have amino oxidases and here amidases. Ammonification, it is considered to be a very prominent or predominant phenomena in aerobic soils. These aerobic soils, if they have more of organic residues, then ammonification will be taking place. When you talk about acidic soils, in the acidic soils, this process is done by fungi. And therefore, as we have seen previously, bacteria perform better as compared to the fungi, so less of ammonia is produced here. Soil, if it consists of carbohydrates, so we know that microbes, they prefer more of carbohydrates than ammonia, than the nitrogenous compounds. So what happens is, if carbohydrate present is there, less of ammonia production you will be seeing, because the preference for microorganisms is shifted to carbohydrates than to the nitrogen compounds. Next, you have this microbial populations and animals, all of these things, they are capable of metabolizing nitrogenous compounds. So some of the microbes, they can metabolize the uric acid which is produced by the higher forms. So metabolization of some of the nitrogenous compounds, that also leads to production of uric acid. So animals, some of them, they produce uric acid also during the process of metabolism. Next is nitrogenous compounds. If they are again being degraded. Say for example, the complex nitrogen compounds like proteins. We know that proteins, they consist of carbon as well as nitrogen, a little bit of oxygen, and then even sulfur. So during this process of degradation, what you see is that they can be good sources of carbon, nitrogen, as well as energy for some of the organisms. And ammonia, the thing is that ammonia is a gas, so it is volatile and it's also positively charged. So it gets very dispersed very easily. Or what happens is, you know that the soil consists of clay particles. These clay particles are negatively charged. So you can see that ammonia is bound to these clay particles of the soil, and this is how it can become available for the plants also, ammonia. So the soil solution, which is consisting of this ammonia, it can be readily oxidized to nitrification, the next step of the nitrogen cycle. So this ammonia, it can be sent to the next step, that is conversion into nitrites, then nitrates, then nitrous, again back to elemental nitrogen. So the organic nitrogen, which is present in the molecules, it is converted into ammonia. We have seen the ammonification process. Next is nitrites, followed by nitrates, nitrous oxide, which can be again converted back to atmospheric nitrogen. So all those steps represented here becomes our nitrogen cycle. So once again, the atmospheric nitrogen, which you call it as the nitrogen, it constitutes to around 78% of the air. This nitrogen is subjected to biological nitrogen fixation, wherein some microorganisms, they fix the nitrogen, and this is the first step wherein nitrification is taking place, that is biological nitrogen fixation is taking place by some prokaryotes. So this nitrogen, it is taken up by the plants after nitrification. The plants can consume that biological nitrogen and then they fix it or immobilize it in the form of proteins, which are consumed by the animals. So it enters the herbivores, then the carnivores and all. And later on, because of the excreta, that is the cow dung, or as they die after putrefaction, what you see is that as they decompose, ammonia is released. This ammonia in turn can be assimilated by the prokaryotes, and then they can convert these into nitrates and nitrates also. Again, it becomes available for the plants. This ammonia can also be converted to nitrite by the microorganisms here, then into nitrates. These nitrates can be taken up by the plants, or these nitrates can be converted to nitrous oxide, which in turn be converted into atmospheric nitrogen. So you see that the cycle is completed. Okay, nitrogen to ammonia to nitrite to nitrate, nitrous oxide, again back to nitrogen. In between, what you see is that it is fixed as biomolecules, that is as proteins. But as we die or as we excrete urea and all of them again are converted back to ammonia, and then the cycle is again back. We have to talk about two important microorganisms, that is nitrosomonas and nitrobacter. Nitrosomonas, it converts the ammonia into nitrous acid, which in turn is converted to nitric acid. So this becomes the source for nitrate. So the nitrification process, the complete nitrification process, right from conversion of ammonia to nitrate, is done by two microorganisms, nitrosomonas and nitrobacter. First to nitrous acid and then to nitric acid. So this nitrate is now available for the plants. One more simple biological nitrogen fixation which I could get. So you see that nitrogen fixing bacteria, they convert into nitrates or they convert into ammonia and urea. You see that once it's converted to nitrates, it is taken up by the higher plants, then it is fixed as amino acids, then into the proteins, which is taken up by higher animals. As these higher animals excrete out, we give out ammonia, urea, etc. So again, it reaches back to the soil, which in turn can be acted upon by nitrifying bacteria that convert them into nitrites. Then you have, that is the nitrosomonas, it converts into nitrite. Then nitrobacter, which is the nitrifying bacteria, converts into nitrate, and this nitrate can again be taken up by higher plants. You see, even this nitrogen fixing bacteria, they can fix the atmospheric nitrogen. So this is the simplest representation of biological nitrogen fixation and the organisms that are involved in it. And if they ask you nitrogen cycle for an essay question, please use this. Okay, here you have the atmospheric nitrogen, a very good one. Okay, atmospheric nitrogen, which can be fixed by, we have the blue-green algae, we have the free-living bacteria, as well as symbiotic bacteria, that is uh, this root nodules. In the root nodules we have found rhizobium bacteria. So the blue-green algae, rhizobium bacteria, as well as free-living ones, they can convert it into organic nitrogen, which can be taken up by the plants. So we see that these plants, they can take it up, immobilize it in the proteins, which are passed on to herbivores, carnivores, and all. As these die, the dead matter, as it is decomposed by the decomposers, ammonia is released. This ammonia is converted into nitrate by the nitrifying bacteria, that is the nitrosomonas and the nitrobacter, first into nitrite and then to nitrate. And then denitrification will be taking place. The denitrifying bacteria can convert these again into N2, that is the normal gaseous nitrogen. Here you have one more thing, even lightning that contributes to the nitrogen. These nitrates can also be taken up by the plants and be immobilized. Along with these things, we have the fertilizers, the NPK fertilizers, where nitrogen is mandatorily added for the better growth of plants, and even some mineral sources from the rocks. All these also contribute to the sources of nitrogen that the plants take, and finally we get that nitrogen. So this is one more representation of the nitrogen cycle. Thank you.